I do think that we're in a position really unique in Kansas City that we have such a talented defensive coordinator to be able to learn from and have he and Andy like work together to figure out how to beat one another in practice, that I just feel like the Chiefs are always going to be in a position to take on whatever they see. We've got one of the most creative minds on both sides of the ball, and that really helps them prepare for anything that some other guy might cook up.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
That's right, folks. The show's called Amateur Hour. I'm Ryan Scott Hall, and joining me today, fresh off 5 straight days of football, is Dirkness.
What's up? Feeling alive, baby. Feeling alive.
I see the 2 fist pump happening. You're raising the roof over there a little bit.
I could be.
That's a move I've seen before. Dirk, how was your week 1 of the NFL season?
It's spectacular. I love playing in that opening game, getting the whole slate of the weekend ahead of you. It's fun. But a great time. Got to watch the Bengals look like shit. AFC West, whatever. Well, we'll kind of get around to all these other teams, but
you got like a big takeaway.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like an NFL takeaway here. I was kind of blown away by like the passing futility around the league. And I kind of saw some alarming stats going around, yesterday and today. Net yards passing, 188.3. It's the fewest in any week since week 15, 2007. Passing TDs in week 1. This is since 2019. So from 2019 going up to week 1 of 2024, which was this week, 61 down to 52, 61, 51. Last year, 37. This year, 35. So a huge drop-off in terms of week 1 passing touchdowns. How about 5.1 air yards per completion? That's the lowest in any week in the NFL since 2006. So that just means passes are being completed short. Nobody's going deep. Rushing yards accounted for 39.2% of all offensive yards. Week 1 of 2021, so just 3 years ago, is 29.6. So a 10% rise in terms of ratio for yards. And EPA per play was actually higher on runs than passes in week 1, which is unheard of. Because, that was always the argument for throwing the ball is that, EPA is usually looking at a play-by-play basis here. And, running has its advantages. But in terms of every single play, passing is more advantageous than running the ball. So this was just kind of wild to see, and something, we talked about this off and on last year, that defenses are just kind of winning against offenses this year, or last year, and this year continuing. And it's just kind of a wild trend to see in the NFL because, offenses were just going up and up and up for years, for decades, it seemed like. And now for all of a sudden to see this decline in numbers, that's kind of like I love studying league-wide trends, and that was the biggest league-wide trend that's really started, kind of 2-3 years ago and continued way more so into last year and continuing more into this week 1.
Yeah. I probably have a relative or two that might be like, well, if it wasn't for all those damn running quarterbacks, maybe the passing numbers would be better. But it is really interesting to see that the run game, I saw everybody freaking out over this graph about the running game, like surpassing the passing game in EPA. When I hear EPA, I think Environmental Protection Agency. I know that it means expected points added. But I guess when I think about like the way that some of these games played out, I think about the overtime of Sunday Night Football and the Lions just running it play after play right down the field against the Rams, emphatically, just saying like we want the ball and we're going to score, to quote Matt Hasselbeck. right?
As somebody playing David Montgomery in week 1 of fantasy and losing because of that drive, I concur in watching that drive. I hated that drive.
I mean, you watched the game last night and Jordan Mason steps in and, 150 rushing yards practically. And I think about like some of the teams that were successful on Sunday, and Joe Mixon was out there just tearing up the field in arguably his best game as a professional in his debut for the Texans. And so I guess in some ways, like, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that the running games were such a big factor. And we can even look back to the Chiefs game and see how much damage Lamar did. We can, look in the division and see the Chargers ran the ball really well. J.K. Dobbins, kind of hitting the fountain of youth a little bit there on Sunday. I am surprised that with the run being so effective that teams aren't passing better. Because usually it's like you got to run to set up the pass. And then if you're running so well, you've got all this play action and whatever. But, I mean, I wonder how much some of these numbers are skewed by the fact that, like, Caleb Williams had less than 100 yards passing. There's
surely that was Caleb Haney out there, wasn't it? Was it not?
I mean,
the worst quarterback I've ever seen was Caleb Haney on the Bears. And yet, Caleb yesterday or 2 days ago, he might have been worse.
I mean, what do you think this is like? What do we take away from it? Is this something that we expect to continue all year long? Is it teams weren't playing their starters in the preseason and so they come out and they look rusty? Or is it all about the timing of the passing game and, I don't know. It's probably a little bit of all those things and 100 other things too. But we were talking about how with the Chiefs, we expect this offense, or at least I'm saying I expect them to be one of the all-time offenses, which would obviously buck the trends that we're seeing across the league. So is this something you expect to continue, whether that's for the Chiefs or league-wide, that we kind of have this defensive resurgence?
Well, I think what I would say, there's 2 different ways you could describe what the Chiefs offense is going to do this year. And if you're saying, I think the Chiefs can have the best offense in the NFL in 2024, I totally agree.
Yeah.
If you are saying that the Chiefs are going to have one of the all-time offenses and have it look something similar to what they were like 2018 to 2020, I don't think those offenses will be around anymore. I don't think we'll see an offense like that for, I don't want to say how long, but the foreseeable future. I don't think you'll see anything close to that this year. I think overall numbers will just continue to be down a little bit from what they were in that, late 2010s offensive surge. So, I mean, what's causing it? I was reading a Nate Tice article from like last year to try and get an idea. And it was basically more or less saying teams are playing a lot of conservative zone. Zone numbers are way up. And this is kind of just what we would call the rise of the too high, which we really saw take off in 2021, which was kind of the start of the, downfall of these offensive numbers. And that's really just, it's put offenses in a tough spot because they have to be so efficient and not make a mistake. And sack numbers are something that was highlighted in the article big time. Sack numbers are way up. I'm not sure why, but it just seems like defensive line and pass rushers are ahead of offensive line these days. I'm not sure why that would totally be, unless like defensive coordinators are just getting smarter in their blitz schemes here. But so that's something. You take a sack, and all of a sudden you have these defenses playing too high and sitting back like that. Man, it's hard to pick up a 2nd and 17. So, I look at all that. I think week 1 this year, the running numbers weren't necessarily better last year. It was kind of like passing and running were going down together. Week 1 might just be like a misnomer. Defenses aren't playing in the preseason anymore. We're seeing players that are, out of shape, at least not ready for 80 football plays out there and trying to stop the run in overtime. Like that's when you see like the Rams out there going out there in overtime after, playing an entire game. And now you're trying to stop like this mauling offensive line with this powerful running back who's on like his, 9th, 10th, 11th carry. Like he's fresh as hell. You're just not going to stop that. You saw how that happened. I mean, you saw it with the Chiefs with Nick Bolton, who a lot of people are kind of speculating that not in the best shape. His conditioning was not there. He looked really slower than we're used to him looking. So I think that's part of the week 1. And then overall, I think you're kind of seeing the too high is just the general explanation of why offensive numbers are just coming down now.
All right, so just to summarize, my co-host here, Dirky Downer, just yes,
we got the best offense in the league. That's not good enough. We were like 13th last year.
I was out here trying to tell people that the Chiefs are going to be a historic offense. I'm so excited about the new weapons, not even unveiling one of them quite yet, unless you count the one preseason catch that then like separated his collarbone or whatever.
Hell of a catch.
But you know, I am expecting big things from this offense, and Dirk says, maybe this year, maybe just compared to the other teams in the league this year.
Which is, actually, I just don't think we'll ever get to that point. And other offenses at that time too were like putting up huge numbers. I mean, the Rodgers in Green Bay in that time period was going nuts. Lamar had a year, his MVP year, his first MVP year. Their offense has insane numbers, and I just don't. Nobody's approaching that right now. It's not happening.
You know, our producer Nick makes a good point in our private chat here that like if teams are going to be playing too high, it means that you're basically going to be looking at light boxes, right? Like the difference between a heavy box and a light box is whether or not you bring that safety down, essentially. And so in a lot of ways, you know, if teams are going to play too high, it does make sense to run the ball. One thing that I do want to point out, and this is going to be getting ahead of myself, but I want to say it so that we don't forget it. The beginning of this, when teams started playing cover 2 again pretty consistently, if I remember correctly, the first team that really did it was the Bucks against the Chiefs in 2020, right? I want to say that we really struggled against the defense that they played in the second half of a regular season game. We like torched them in the first half, and in the second half, we didn't score a lot. And then they played basically the exact same thing in that Super Bowl later that year. And
theirs was kind of coupled with like a defensive line, a really, really good defensive line going against a really battered offensive line. So I guess it does go back that far, but yeah, I think the early, like Vic Fangio's defenses were kind of running this early. The Rams, I don't know if Fangio was there at that time, but the Rams, they had a dude who was pushing it pretty hardcore, and it was working. And it's just kind of like just kind of started rising from our late 2020, and 2021 really started picking up. And that's when we saw the Chiefs offense hit those early to mid-season struggles big time. And they had a couple games in there where they were struggling hard.
Well, and eventually it's Lou Anarumo, you know, and 3 losses to the Bengals. We'll get to that. But I do think that, you know, there were a couple defenses doing it, and now it's just peer pressure, right? Like everybody's doing it. I wonder, like, I don't know why. Nick, yes, it is a copycat league. You know, I wonder like why teams started to go away from the cover 2, what offenses started doing to counter it. You know, I mean, football's always a cat and mouse game, and it goes back and forth. And I think that it's been so offense centric, I guess, for so long that everybody's maybe been kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And whether that's some new defensive system or new defensive talent coming in, whether that's players or coaches, I'm not totally sure. I do think that we're in a position really unique in Kansas City that we have such a talented defensive coordinator to be able to learn from, and have he and Andy like work together to figure out how to beat one another in practice, that I just feel like the Chiefs are always going to be in a position to take on whatever they see. We've got one of the most creative minds on both sides of the ball, and that really helps them prepare for anything that some other guy might cook up.
Yes, and I just had one more stat here on the offense that I wanted to get in. A little bit of a deep dive before we take our break. Let's do a deep dive. Here we go, folks. Let's dive down deep. Chiefs offense. We're looking at long touchdowns because I saw a stat from this Ravens game that I had to get in here, coupled with some recent Chiefs historical offensive stats. So the Chiefs actually had 2 touchdowns in this game against the Ravens of 20-plus yards. And I saw an alarming stat where they only had 4 of those last year. 4 touchdowns over 20 yards all of last year. So I kind of want to go back and see how that stacked up against these old Chiefs offenses and, see what's going down with, through the Mahomes era. So they had 4 last year. 2022, they had 9. 2021, they had 12. 2020, they had 17. 2019, they had 21 touchdowns of 20-plus yards. 2018, only 15, which kind of shocked me. And then I dove just a little bit deeper because we got to go a little bit deeper for these deep dives, Last year, the Chiefs offense only had 7 touchdowns of 10 yards or more. 7 touchdowns of 10 yards or more. It blew my mind. That's insane. So 2 of these are Pacheco runs. One of them's to MVS. 2 of them were to Rashee Rice. One's to Noah Gray, and one's Jerick McKinnon. 2 of those are runs. 3 of the 7 were say pass short on StatHead was the description of the play. So, even of those 7 touchdowns that were over 10 yards for the Chiefs offense in 2023, 2 were runs, 3 were short passes, and then 2 might have actually been like a deep passing touchdown. It's just an alarming number. I know we had all the drops and everything else, the receiver problems, but that was alarming when looking at the Chiefs offenses of recent history.
I mean, they still kind of look like that. Like, it wasn't like full on bombs away.
No.
And we'll see some defenses this year that might give the Chiefs an opportunity or two. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about some of the Chiefs' prime AFC opponents and how they fared in Week 1.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone in any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with your existing contacts with you. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/AHPKC. That's mintmobile.com/AHPKC. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/AHPKC. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Hey, podcast listeners. You want to make some money? Listen, we've been trying to tell you guys about this survey that Blue Wire is doing that's really just meant to enhance your experience and also the product that we're putting together week after week. So all you got to do is go take a really short survey and you'll be entered to win a $500 gift card. Go to bluewirepods.com/survey. Answer a few simple questions, and just go through and give yourself a chance to win some money. On top of that, folks, once again, here in 2024, for this season, we are partnered with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City, and your company can hit it out of the park with a sports league sponsorship with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. You can reach thousands of local families while giving kids the opportunity to get in the game. Send an email to giving@helpkckids.org, and they can give you all the information you need for a sports league sponsorship with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City.
Can't help with a sponsorship? Maybe consider coaching. If you consider yourself coaching as from the couch during games, maybe move that to the sidelines as a volunteer with the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Kansas City. Learn more at helpkckids.org.
Well, Dirk, it's time to do, like a little NFL whip around. We don't have the music or anything, but we're
I'll just sing it the whole time. Can I give takes and sing? Is the question.
Yeah, that would be tough. But I know you wanted to take a look at maybe some of the Chiefs, like big time AFC opponents, just going to see how they fared through week 1. Anybody want to start with, Dirk?
I'm open. Who you want? You want to start AFC West?
Yeah, let's just start inside the division. We've got 3 teams here in the AFC West. And you know what?
Teams. Using it loosely.
Yeah, sure. 2 of them played each other, right? Do I have that right? Do I see that the Chargers and Raiders?
Yes. The LA Chargers played the LA Raiders.
Okay. What'd you think of that Chargers game? Did you get that out there on the West Coast? Was that one of your?
We got it. A bit of a slog. Might have gone down to the ocean for a bit during the game. But yeah. Let's start with the Chargers. I think they are probably our top competition in the AFC West. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to be exactly who we thought they were, or at least exactly who I thought they were. I am very confident they're going to be a 9 to 10 win team. They look much better coached than they were last year. They're going to run the ball, but no offensive weapons on the outside kind of caps their ceiling. Like, I just can't see them being a great team with the way the team is presently constructed. We'll see on the defense, but also, if nothing else, they've got 2 stud offensive tackles at this point, because Joe Alt, son of John Alt, put up he had some great numbers, as well as their other tackle, Rashawn Slater. So I think they have 2 bookend offensive tackles, if nothing else, in LA for the Chargers, for the Fighting Harbaughs.
I did see like a couple little highlights from that game. I don't know if like it's a Harbaugh thing, or if it's like a popularized thing or what. But when they broke down the huddle, like in the locker room after the game, Harbaugh said, "Who's got it better than us?"
Yeah, that's a Harbaugh thing.
Oh, buddy, that one's out there. Okay,
yeah, Michigan thing.
Oh, okay. I mean, honestly, okay. So Harbaugh thing. I when I started thinking about it, I'm like, well,
you chant something? Did you chant something? No. The Chiefs. Chiefs are better than you. I mean,
honestly, no. I was thinking about like quality of life. Like you work in a $5 billion of real estate development. You play in LA. No one really cares if you win or lose. Like truly, like about as stress-free situation as possible for an NFL player.
Not to mention he just blatantly cheated while in Michigan, wins the national championship, and then leaves with no repercussions whatsoever. So he's just like, who's got it better than me? I can just cheat as much as I want. As soon as I get caught, I leave. That's how it happens.
And what's crazy to me is that everyone keeps trying to sell me on this idea that Harbaugh is like, oh, this guy's Ted Lasso. Like, he's high energy and he's always positive and enthusiastic and whatever. And I'm like, he blatantly cheated and ducked the allegations. All right. Like, I don't know.
That's season 4 of Ted Lasso? Is that what's coming?
Might be. Ted truly goes off the deep end.
We can't win the big ones, so he gives in. And it's like, we see him become a bad guy.
Yeah. And it turns out that he is Nick Nolte in Blue Chips.
Hell yes. Same universe.
They both really like the sweater, the V-neck sweater. It's happening in both series.
I've seen Blue Chips in way too long. I got to see that.
Look, I don't know if the Chargers are really ever going to be worth believing in. I think that Harbaugh is a good coach. I still think that franchise is, got some weird hocus pocus going on. I think that for fantasy purposes, I don't want any of them. And when I think about you're talking about like the success that they're clearly going to try to have on the ground. I don't know if it'll last with a 31 or 32-year-old Gus Edwards, and a like 3 or 4 time reconstructed knee, J.K. Dobbins. I do think that they have a couple weapons in the passing game that could maybe give the Chiefs some fits. We'll see. Josh Palmer had his way last year with L'Jarius Sneed, unlike most number 1 receivers out there.
Josh Palmer got ejected in the game. Did you see that? Old scrappy do in the end zone.
Nice. Who is he fighting? Do you know?
It's the dude for the Patriots, Jack Jones. Is that his name? Jack Jones.
Yeah.
But it was like 6 or 8 guys. Max Crosby was in there. Nobody really wanted to fuck with Crosby too much.
Yeah.
There's usually it seems like a corner and a receiver going at it, and then like an offensive or defensive lineman comes up, and it's like Trent Williams comes up, Sue comes up, and it's like, all right, we're good. I'm done.
I did hear that Alt had a pretty decent day against Max Crosby, which is not an easy thing to do. They're going to be a tough team. I'm sure they have played the Chiefs tough, even when it.
I think we're still getting some pressure though inside. I think Christian Wilkins had a good day, so. Okay. Let's go to the Raiders. Yeah. They might have a solid defense. Max Crosby, and then the new acquisition next to him, Wilkins. That's a pretty damn good combo up front. And they had a surprisingly good defense last year. Like nobody really expected it, and that's how they were kind of able to finish with a decent record and able to pop the Chiefs in the mouth on Christmas Day. But I don't think they're going to be able to score on offense really all season. I think that's just going to be a struggle for them. And outside of that, Antonio Pierce completely embarrassed himself with the punt from the whatever it was, 45 or whatever. Everybody knows it at this point, but it was just alarming. And they never got the ball back with any, conceivable chance to win the game. It was one of the worst, most cowardly punts I've ever seen. And this just goes to show, like, hiring the interim coach who the players love and finished last season, 3-1. It just never works out. It never works out. And yet teams can fall into it time and time again. And I can only assume that Pierce will be the latest version of that.
Until the Raiders get a real quarterback, they can at times, like on any given Sunday, they can compete with the Chiefs. There's just so much history there that's to be expected. I think that Antonio Pierce probably would have made an excellent defensive coordinator. Much like, we've had our own little roll in the hay with Romeo Crennel here in Kansas City.
How'd that work?
Did the same thing with old Gunther Cunningham too, frankly. Look, I think that I don't know that you give the Raiders offense enough credit, because I think that Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers is arguably like one of the top 5 receiver duos in the league.
Adams and who?
Jacoby Myers. I think they're great. Personally, I think they're both, and they have diverse skill sets. And you add Brock Bowers into that mix. I think that they have a pretty diverse set of pass catchers.
Tight ends are nice. Devontae might be a little done. I think he's like 32. He's hitting that age where receivers really start to see the dip. I could see Devontae just not being the player he used to be.
I could also see Minshew throwing him the ball like 180 times this year. I mean, like he might still be less of himself, but still put numbers up. At any rate, let's talk about these Denver Broncos. Now, I've heard a lot of bad things about Bo Nix. That's what everyone is focused on, is Bo Nix. It was so bad. You can't even believe how bad it was. You will not believe. I heard that Jaleel McLaughlin had 5 catches for like 1 yard. One of the running backs out of the backfield. But the Broncos did score 20 points. I don't know how they scored them, but it couldn't have been that bad. They put up 20.
2 safeties.
Scored 20.
Two safeties is a good start on that.
Oh, really? Cool.
It's a good question. I don't know how they scored 20 points either. There was a garbage touchdown at the end, but I mean they were winning that game, in the second half. Like their defense looked pretty strong. Bo Nix looked alarmingly bad. I was watching him fairly closely. he basically refused to throw the ball downfield. And then when he did, he was throwing it to the Seahawks more than he was the Broncos. Like every single time that he attempted to throw over 5 yards, it was either intercepted or going through a defender's hands. It looked really, really bad. I am very excited to cheer against him. I was very low on him. I got a bet on the Broncos being the worst team in the league. I just think he's going to have a lot of growing pains. And so, but their defense looked pretty good, I guess. So I don't know, them and the Raiders, I guess, right there at 3-4. I'd probably have the Raiders ahead of the Broncos personally. I just think Bo Nix is really going to sink them, and Minshew will be able to lift the Raiders to a few of the wins. But I think Bo Nix it's going to be a real struggle all season.
I don't know, man. Look, he had the most passing yards on their team.
On their team?
And the most rushing yards on their team.
Yes, he does run. He's pretty quick, so.
But the 138 passing yards on 42 attempts is rough stuff.
I saw a stat with there's always the a lot of attempts and low amount of yards, and I always keep my eye out for that Derek Carr too cold for the Raiders game, and I saw it. I saw Jumas post a stat. It was like 38 attempts and 100 under 150 yards or something, and there it is. Let's see it. One of the best games ever. So yeah, that was the territory he was in. It was too cold, although it was week 1 in a sunshiny Seattle, I believe. So I'm not sure what the conditions were. Too loud, too maybe moist, too humid. We'll have to check the Doppler on that one.
Too competitive, perhaps, for Bo Nix. Speaking of competitive, let's look at the top competitors here in the AFC. Dirk, you could flip a coin if you want to talk about the Bills or the Texans. I imagine that these are probably kind of top of everyone's mind based on the way that everybody played over the weekend. Maybe let's start with the Bills, and then we can talk about Colts Texans.
Yeah, the Buffalo Buffs. I thought Josh was tremendous. He is a one-man wrecking crew. It looked like my tweet was he looks like the kid who's like in high school, but he's way better than everybody else. So he kind of just gets the snap and then just starts running, and everybody else is just trying to tackle him. It's just 10 guys like trying to block and 11 guys trying to tackle him, and that was kind of like the first half because they got down early, and then Josh was like, "Okay, I'm taking this into my own hands," and he just took off and ran time and time again. It was also super windy, so the passing games were a struggle out there. Like he only had like 2 completed passes at halftime, I think. He ended up completing quite a few. But the Bills will be a ground and pound team. They're kind of one of these teams that are leaning into where maybe the NFL is going, and they're going to be running the ball, and then they're going to have Josh Allen do things on third down, and that's their team. But they're going to need their defense to be better. I don't think you can have like a run-heavy team unless you have a good defense to go along with it. And the defense kind of struggled this week. So I think the question for them is McDermott, can he figure it out, the defensive end, with the dip in talent that they've seen, losing both those safeties, losing who else they lose? I mean, Von Miller's a shell of what he was. They lost Matt Milano is hurt for the season, maybe.
Yes.
But yeah, just not as talented a unit as we're used to seeing on that side for the Bills.
And listen, Buffalo, who's at the Dolphins on Thursday, that'll be a fun one this week. They were trailing the Arizona Cardinals. Scrappy Cardinals team led the Bills 17-10 at half. Buffalo really figured it out in the second half, though. They ended up scoring 34, one of the highest point totals of the week. And Josh Allen, like you said, I didn't know that he only had like a couple completions at halftime, but he had a pretty what looked like easy day, 18 of 23 for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 2 more on the ground. The thing about the Bills, I think that they did lose some talent this offseason, and because they're all veterans, like it's a loss for sure. I don't know that they're going to be like worse. I think that they're probably going to end up being more athletic, and they're going to be getting some fresh blood out there. And that iteration of the Bills had clearly grown stale. And so transitioning away from the Poyer-Hyde combination on the back end of their defense, transitioning away from Stephon Diggs on the offensive side of the things, I think that these might be good changes in Buffalo. They're a tough team for me to figure out, though, because offensively, they actually, on paper, they remind me quite a bit of last year's Chiefs, where it's like, we have all these different guys that we like. We think that they might be good, but we have no idea, like, really who this pass game is going to be funneled through. And they're hoping it's Keon Coleman. And maybe he ends up, in the latter half of the season looking like Rashee Rice, and that helps their offense come together. But I think that Buffalo is going to have a tough time offensive identity wise for a lot of the season. And then, it's always going to be Josh, right? Like, they live and die with Josh Allen. And maybe he's got more of a piece of their identity even than like Mahomes does for us, if that makes sense, because he does so much in that running game for them that it's like,
he will be in a position this year to have more on his shoulders, I guess I would say. So I mean, with the weapons coming in here to help Mahomes, with Andy by his side, you can even say, I kind of get what you're saying, but he's like the one man. It's like their offense is Josh Allen. Like, okay, go get us 30 points, and that's going to be him every week. Now, can you sustain that for a full season? We'll see. I mean, things got to change for them when they fired Dorsey and went to Joe Brady last year. They kind of had the turnaround, and they went run heavy, and they're throwing to their tight ends, and Diggs really got phased out of the offense. So them down the stretch, which really, that was, well, I was going to say the most competitive game the Chiefs played in the playoffs. Like, I don't know, they were with the 49ers, I guess. But, I mean, they were toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. I mean, it came down to a missed field goal, then we would have gone to overtime and seen what happened there. But that version of the Bills team, which a lot of it is back. I know they lost some defensive pieces, but that version of the Bills team is back this year. And I really think even with the lack of weapons, I think they'll still be around at the end, just because, I think Josh Allen is that good. This is where he thrives and doing a whole lot. And so I think I was higher on the Bills than other people going into the season. So I think they're still.
I think the team that probably most people in the AFC looking at contenders, the real hot shot this year would be the Houston Texans. Kind of came up out of nowhere last year with a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach. Obviously had an excellent season. Showed up big in the playoffs, won a playoff game with CJ Stroud as a rookie. They played a division rival with the Colts and another really big-armed young quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Had a pretty amazing play in that game.
I gasped and I think squealed.
I don't know how much of this game you caught, especially since it seems like Richardson is making these bombs. So I don't even know if they were like in red zone all that often. But I will say the Texans led for all of about 10 minutes of this game. They look like they're one of the clear contenders in the AFC. And yes, Indy kind of kept it interesting, but it felt like the Texans were in control. And I have a feeling that that's what a lot of this season is going to feel like for them. I think that they will probably have some bumps along the way, of course. But that looks like a pretty serious football team to me, those Houston Texans.
So one theory that I believe with the Chiefs kind of going forward is that, their long-term rivals, it won't like continue to be the Bengals or the Bills or the Ravens or, the Chargers, or even in the NFC, the 49ers or the Eagles. I think it will be the best QBs that are on rookie contracts. Like, I think why these teams were their top rivals for this chunk of time is because they had the best quarterbacks that were on rookie deals. Now, most of those teams and most of the quarterbacks are on their big contract now, but we haven't seen the money like kick in yet. Like, a lot of them signed them already, but like starting like this year, we see in the Bills kind of have to reset their cap, and it's going to start carrying over into these other ones. Chargers, Lamar's contract goes way up this year. You're going to start see them having to shed talent elsewhere and really depend on these quarterbacks to be, $50 million quarterbacks for them. And we saw the Chiefs already manage this. I mean, we already went through our rebuilding year of 2022, where we kind of reset the cap, got rid of Tyreek, and it's like, okay, we have to prepare for a Mahomes big contract team moving forward, which they've done beautifully. And that's what kind of separates them from these other teams, being able to win while doing that. I say all that to say the Houston Texans are the next team up, and CJ Stroud is this quarterback on a rookie deal. They're putting talent all around him. They got Stephon Diggs, who's probably their third best receiver with these other two speedsters. They were able to sign Joe Mixon, who I'd never really feared that much, but the Texans will commit to the run. Even last year when they didn't do it very well, they were committing to it. But, it's still a lot of expectations on a young quarterback. And that was kind of where I was with the Texans going into the year. Like, is this too much too soon for these guys? Like, people are putting them in the AFC Championship. People are putting them in the Super Bowl. Are they ready for those expectations? And Stroud looks good, but not great in this game. He had 2 interceptions that did not count. One was like just out of bounds or something, and one was dropped or a penalty or something. But he had a couple really bad interceptions in there. So we'll see. I'm kind of curious to see if their defense is good again. It overachieved last year. They brought in the Daniil Hunter, and they got Will Anderson, so that's some good Russians, and Stingley. I think people really like him as a corner. So if they got a good D and Stroud is ready to handle these expectations, it's very possible this is going to be the top competitor for the Chiefs in the AFC.
It looks that way to me, unless, Stephon Diggs starts throwing temper tantrums or something.
There was a cutaway to him like talking on the sideline, and I saw people using it as like he's mad on the sideline, and it didn't look like that at all. It was the weirdest. Like, he's mad on the sidelines already, and it's just him like he was like mimicking holding the football. It was like just talking. It was really weird.
Yeah, we don't have to build something out of nothing, because like when it starts to happen, you'll know. It's not going to be tough to see. I am curious, Dirk. Another team that I think coming into the season, people thought was going to be a contender, and I don't know if they still feel that way after week 1. We love an overreaction to week 1 here on Amateur Hour. Are the Bengals the worst team in the NFL? They lost at home to the New England Patriots.
I guess if you're doing it like championship belt style, and the Patriots were the worst team going in, and they beat the Bengals, then yeah, they would take the belt. They would be the heavyweight champions of the worst team in the NFL right now.
What an absolutely atrocious performance in the orange out they were hosting there at Cincinnati.
The uniforms, they have plenty of good combinations. They look good. Those are all oranges. It's hideous.
Yeah, no, it's not good. I mean, look, the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL. And that's clear. But the Bengals, anything good to say? Like, I walk away from that game as a Bengals fan, and I'm like, okay, so the one guy that we have paid has an unprecedented injury to one of the most important body parts given his job. Joe Burrow with this wrist that he's never found like any skill player. No one other than an offensive or defensive lineman have ever had the wrist injury that Burrow has.
Really?
It's a very unique, rare injury. The guy for most of the offseason was not allowed to throw more than 2 days in a row. It's just been a lot of bad vibes in Cincinnati. And now they have, presumably they want to pay Jamar Chase, maybe reluctantly because they have this notoriously cheap owner. But you have a seemingly unhealthy and unhappy T. Higgins. And Jamar Chase is petty enough when he's not, holding out for money and whatever. I just look at this and I say, man, this team is falling apart before our eyes is kind of how it feels. Do you look at the Bengals as anywhere near the kind of threat that they have been, I guess, over the last, 3 seasons or so?
Before the season, yes. I might be coming down on that a little bit, but I just thought this was kind of a big time year for Joe Burrow. And I believe in Joe Burrow. I did believe in Joe Burrow. I think I still believe in Joe Burrow. But him getting hurt last year, he's had a few injuries. This might be his last year with both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Like I just saw, they have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL because they actually finished 4th in their division last year. So I thought a lot of things kind of pointed at the Bengals. I picked them to play in the AFC Championship with the Chiefs. And I just expected a huge bounce back year from Burrow. I was not, the wrist was clearly, I don't know if he's still injured or just still thinking about it. But it definitely was not the Joe Burrow that we're used to. I think they've totally fucked up by not paying Jamar Chase. He didn't seem engaged in the game, really. He definitely wasn't engaged leading up to the game, just kind of leaving it open if he's going to play or not. They're clearly going to sign him eventually, so I don't know why they're messing around with not doing it now and not doing it later. Like, okay, if you don't sign him, what are you going to do? Pivot and sign T. Higgins, and then he's your number one, and just T. Higgins? Like, good luck. It's not going to be enough. So you do just kind of wonder, like, we've seen Burrow get it done at a lot of big spots against a lot of big quarterbacks. 5-1 against Josh Allen and Mahomes. That's kind of the money stat for him. But he's always had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And maybe I would like to see more of a sample size, I guess, of just only having one of them, because he definitely didn't look like the same quarterback, whether it was the wrist injury or whether it was not having both Chase and Higgins out there, and he's just not quite the same quarterback without both.
Yeah, and it's like you said. I mean, the Bengals are now a team that has paid their quarterback. They had a pretty significant defensive exodus, and they really haven't been able to, recapture the magic of that Lou Anarumo run. I don't know if people are aware. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. The Chiefs lost 3 straight games to the Bengals, and they actually all ended up inside of the year 2021.
I remember.
All of Burrow's success against the Chiefs happened in one calendar year. That's it. 2021.
Well, and there's also the Bengals starting the season as just, they come out and start the season like a train wreck every single year. Like Burrow's record in weeks 1 and 2 was, I think it was 1-7 or 1-8, something ridiculous.
Well, it's real bad. And I mean, he's been terrible in September, but particularly the first 2 weeks of the season, they're just like punting.
It's crazy. And yeah, so we're used to seeing late season Cincinnati. Like, we've only played them late in the season. And for whatever reason, they are not themselves in September, and they seem to have it together come, December or January, when we tend to play them. But man, that's a wild to see, like, at the start. You just think they'd eventually figure it out. Maybe they just have no interest in playing a home playoff game. Like, we don't have that big of an advantage. Like, we've done it on the road in the playoffs before, so we just believe we can do it again. So we just punt on early season games here. I don't know.
I mean, and this is why I think, people have had a hard time taking them all that seriously. Like, in many ways, the Chiefs failed in that first loss to the Bengals. Or I guess maybe that wasn't their first, but the one with the Tyreek play at the end of the first half, and then they just really couldn't seem to get it back together, and that's just how they played for a while against the Bengals. Just got in their own way. I wanted to look a little bit at maybe like some of the bad blood in this rivalry. I don't know if there is a team that the Chiefs players care more about beating. Like they just want to kick the Bengals' ass. And it's, all of the shit talking and everything that has transpired between these two teams. I really think that if there is a team in the NFL that, like, the Chiefs just want to rub their noses in it, it's the Bengals. And it really looks like week 2 is going to be an opportunity for that. But, you think about some of the back and forth between these teams, just if you guys aren't remembering and you want to kind of like get yourself, jacked up a little bit. I know it's only Wednesday, but I mean, Jamar Chase basically just refuses to acknowledge that Patrick Mahomes is clearly the best player in the league, clearly the best quarterback. He still shows his blind loyalty to Joe Burrow. And they asked Jamar Chase at one point a question about Patrick Mahomes, and he did the who. And then, of course, the very famous Patrick Mahomes response after the Chiefs got their second ring, when he's got the that's who with his 2 Super Bowl rings on his hand. And they've gone back and forth in the media. We've got Cincinnati's mayor doing all the stupid stuff, and eventually Travis Kelce drunkenly calling him a jabroni, and Burrowhead, and even better, Burrowhead my ass, which I really loved. I mean, look, these teams have really gone back and forth, both publicly and just on the field of play. They don't like each other. And I'm really excited. You even mentioned after that Ravens game in our show on Friday that, like, gosh, man, now I'm thinking about the Bengals coming up this next week, and like it feels real. Like football is now happening. Did the loss to New England maybe like pour a little water on that, or are we not as excited to now play the Bengals? Or still excited.
Very excited. Very excited. I mean, I think you'd make the argument, Bengals era might be coming to a close here, depending on how they play out this. If Burrow is hurt, or if Chase and Higgins can't figure this thing out in time for this season, and then one of them's gone next year, like we might be looking at the end of the Bengals era coming very, very soon. I mean, you have to respond to that no-show of week 1, and now you're going up against your blood rivals. I just think the Bengals are very, very ripe to get beaten down on Sunday. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out here right now. The Chiefs are going to beat them silly. I think you have a Chiefs offense that is angsty to explode. I think they've been doing a lot of efficient things, but they want to show off this big playability. They weren't quite able to do it last week. They showed a little bit of it, but I think they got a lot more in the tank. They're out for blood against Cincy. It's looking like T. Higgins will be out. It's looking like Jamar Chase is in la-la land. Looks like Joe Burrow might be hurt. A hungry Arrowhead Stadium in that national TV afternoon slot just ready to feast on them. The vultures are circling, folks, and I think we might see this thing get real ugly on Sunday. Something like 41-10 Chiefs or something. I think that's very much on the table. That the Bengals are. I think they're not ready for what's going to come. I don't think they're in good enough shape as a team to be ready for this. Like, we're used to seeing a game Bengals squad, and I don't think they're ready for it right now.
And, it's a revenge game for Samaje Perine. Just gonna sprinkle a little Samaje on top of everything you mentioned there. And
it could have been Irv Smith too, but we cut him. Damn.
And you got Lando on the other side there. A little back and forth rivalry here. I like.
Hi, Lando.
Yeah.
Don't miss you. Don't miss you.
I like how things are lining up for the Chiefs. I will say, the success for the Patriots against the Bengals largely came on the ground. Ramondre Stevenson was immense on Sunday, and he's got to be. Given the state of their offensive weaponry, but 25 carries, 120 yards. And I guess all I was wondering was, well, Andy, you want to commit to the run on Sunday? I doubt it. They're probably going to try to throw it all over the yard, and that would be fun. But I'm interested. I'd love to see.
I think you'll see both. I think you see a weak run defense. But I think the offense will be putting up some points on Sunday.
I was just imagining, I mean, we won't be looking at the kind of weather that ultimately led to the game that I'm talking about. But gosh, you go back to that game against the Bills, Clyde's best game as a pro, and we handed the ball off probably north of 35 times because nobody could really throw, even Mahomes that day. And I don't know, I'd just be fun to see the Chiefs hand the ball off 35 times against a hapless Bengals team. I've got a couple things in this game that I'm really kind of circling. I love the confidence. I'm right there with you. Two things I'm interested in. Number one, you mentioned, I believe it was just kind of quote tweeting a stat or something that was going on Sunday. And you basically said Trey Hendrickson is great at football. Whatever the numbers were, it was about Trey Hendrickson being very, very good at his job. And he rushes almost exclusively against that left tackle. They don't move him around a lot. He stays on that side. Hubbard is on the other. And I am really going to be watching our rookie left tackle, the Kingslayer, going up against a guy that who I think inarguably Trey Hendrickson has been one of the more frustrating pass rushers for left tackles in the past 5-10 years. He's particularly for the Chiefs. He has not the raw power But just in terms of like the work ethic and the motor, God, he reminds me of Tamba. He just doesn't give up on any play. He really is a fighter out there, and just annoys the crap out of whoever it is that's trying to prevent him from getting to the quarterback. And it's going to be 4 quarters of it, man. As long as, the Chiefs are dropping back to pass, Trey Hendrickson is going to be a threat to come around that edge. I heard that Kingsley, like, really all but maybe 2 or 3 snaps was pretty much on an island in week 1. They're trusting him. They want to see what it looks like. That may not be the case this week. Hendrickson is a lot different than, Odafe Owe and David Ojabo and some of the young, promising pass rushers that Baltimore has. But talking about an established player here, I'm going to be watching Trey Hendrickson pretty close.
Yeah, I would not expect that kind of isolation in this game, just because I think that's kind of the one way that they could wreck you. There were some stats going around, like Trey Hendrickson had more like quick wins, which is, a pressure within however many seconds. He had 5, and nobody else in the NFL had more than 3. The stat that I quoted, I don't even have in front of me. I don't have that, but it was something along the lines of his first half pass rush win rate was like 65%, was like the highest we've seen in something years. But yeah, Trey Hendrickson, I don't think most people realize he had 17.5 sacks last year, 8 the year before that, and then 14 and 13.5. This guy gets a lot of sacks and never gets thrown around in like a top defensive ends conversation. I don't think he's necessarily up there with like the top guys, but he's definitely in that second tier. And they've kind of always given the Chiefs fits, hit both him and Sam Hubbard. They've both always kind of figured out a way to keep contain on Mahomes. Like how many times do we see Patrick Mahomes just roll out and he's able to get around that defensive end just to the right and then makes a huge play because of that? And yet we saw in some very, very big spots, he was not able to do that against the Bengals defensive ends. And it hurt them in a couple big spots. I remember one of those games, it was the Butker missed field goal. I think that was the 3rd of 3 losses. And like the play before that was him trying to escape out to the outside. And it was like a 3rd and 4 or something. And he just cannot get around Hubbard, ends up having to throw it away. And that leads to the ultimate Butker miss, which loses them the game. Hendrickson is underrated. I think he might be like the one way that their defense could have a lot of success in this game. And I would expect Andy to be throwing some help to the Kingslayer's way. That's just how I would handle this week with a rookie going up against a good player like that. Because like you said, nobody on the Ravens, like they have a good team pass rush, I feel like, and a really good inside, but like no one-on-one player is really that big of a matchup problem for a rookie out there.
For sure. Just that's one matchup I definitely want to watch. Another thing I'm going to be really curious about, other side of the ball here, thinking about the Chiefs defense. Last week in week 1 against Baltimore, because of all the 2 tight end stuff and the way that it's you're trying to keep Lamar in the pocket, you don't want to let him rush. We're doing all this spy stuff. They're calling defense completely different than they would for most offenses in the league. And so now we are going up against a Bengals team that I did a little number crunching. Last year, the Bengals were 4th in the NFL in being in 3 wide receiver sets. I believe they call that 11 personnel. Doesn't really matter. But when you have 3 wide receivers on the field, it forces the other team to make a decision, because you can't really be in base defense when there's 3 receivers out there. You're going to take a linebacker off the field. Maybe you take a defensive lineman off and go 3-3-5. Spags did that quite a bit in that first game. But that largely had to do with tight ends. And so we're probably now going to be looking at 3 corners, a true nickel defense against these Bengals. And no matter who the receivers are, this is kind of what Zach Taylor does. He came from the McVay tree, and McVay and the Rams are like 90-95% 3 wide receivers. They're just in it all the time. And that's what the Bengals have been under Zach Taylor. And so because of that, I think it really allows Spagnuolo and allows us as fans to be able to see, like, who are the top 3 corners for this team. Are they going to give you the Watson and Williams on the outside and McDuffie in the slot in this game? Is that what we're going to see, or are we going to be married to this idea that Trent McDuffie is our best corner and therefore must be playing on the outside, and you're going to see Chamari Connor in the slot? the size that the Bengals have at receiver isn't just Chase and Higgins. This guy, Andre, it looks like Iosivas, but I believe it's Yoshivas. Not small, 6'4", over 200 pounds. I think the kid that they just drafted from Alabama, he's a little buried on the depth chart, Jermaine Burton. But I mean, he's over 6 foot. He's over 200 pounds. He's not a small guy. They're not throwing a bunch of Xavier Worthies and McCole Hardmans and Marquise Browns at you. These guys are they're all going to be tough matchups in terms of the size for Trent McDuffie, regardless of whether you try to move him into the slot, right? So I think the Chiefs are really going to have to show their hand a little bit, at least in terms of how they line up. But I'm really excited to see what Spags does, because I'm thinking a lot about that 11th man, how he decides to go against some of these teams. But the Bengals, with that pure 3 wide set that they run, should open some pathways for us to figure out what Spags is thinking this year.
Yeah, I mean, so you're looking at like the snap counts against the Ravens, and you've got Chenal playing 60%, Shamari Chimichanga playing 57%, and then Joshua Williams down to like 40%. So I'm definitely expecting those numbers to flip flop. Joshua Williams, I would expect to be like 80%. I think you have a very defined top 3 corners. I would be a little frustrated if they decided to go away from that. And yeah, I think the biggest question is, you were kind of talking about McDuffie outside or slot. I think it's just a question of if he's going to chase Chase. Are you going to chase Chase? And without Higgins out there, they have a very definitive number 1 option. And we never saw the Chiefs use this too much before until last year, until Snead presents the idea to Spagnuolo. Spagnuolo rolls with it, and then they have their best defensive season by a mile, with Snead chasing them more receivers. Last week, I guess we could have done that with Zay Flowers. I don't think we saw much of it. I didn't see anyone really discuss it, really, so I'm guessing he did not chase him too much. But it will be interesting to see if they decide to do that this week, based on the success they had with it last year, or if they just stick with him in the slot. I like chasing, typically. I like putting your top guy against their top guy, or maybe like a Belichick kind of scheme where you're taking away their number 2 option and double teaming the number 1 guy kind of thing, but following like that. But the Chiefs, their secondary is almost set up so much for McDuffie to be in the slot, and there's the JW twins with their big, slender sizes to be outside. Like, I don't see either of them as slot corners. They just don't have like the quickness in a small spot to cover the slot. So I think it's almost just like too defined for McDuffie to play the slot, which he had great success doing last year, and then put the JW twins both on the outside.
There are certainly better matchups, it looks like, for the size that the Bengals have at receiver. What's also going to be interesting, though, is like, because they're in this weird space personnel-wise, that the Bengals don't know who their third receiver is, and it seems like their number 2 receiver is probably not going to play, that being T. Higgins. They may be doing a lot of like Gesicki in the slot. They just here, and I'm still frustrated that he's not a Chief. And that's okay, because we've got TE12, all right, the heir apparent. But just for the record, they had T. Irwin playing 65% of the snaps. Is that Trent Irwin, I believe? Yes, I think he's the fast guy, small and fast, if I remember that correctly. He's one of the little guys. No, wait. Oh, that's Trent Irwin. Yes, the white guy. You're right.
Yeah.
I think Yosh is white too. They got 2 white receiver ones out there.
I think we found the problem.
So this is why they only scored 10 points on Sunday. I do think, though, that they might do some Gesicki in the slot too. And with all those guys, like, that might be Chamari Connor, man. It might be a lot of McDuffie and Watson and Connor, with some Williams sprinkled in. Maybe it's a 50-50 split for Williams and Connor, and just not much Leo. Who knows? I don't know. It'll be interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to get a down Bengals team at the beginning of the year, and just ruin their opening month.
The only thing that gives me pause in saying like we could end their season right here, because I do think there is a degree of like they need to respond after last week, but then 4 of their next 5 opponents here after the Chiefs game Washington, Carolina, the Giants, and the Browns. So 4 of their next 5 games. This is why, this is one of the reasons I was high on Cincinnati going into this year. Their schedule is extremely easy. They're playing the NFC East, which is terrible, or at least 2 of the teams are terrible. So they do have this fallback where, they should win 4 of the next 5 games if they're any kind of team with playoff hopes. So they could still be fine after this game. And that's why I just think they're going to be, I feel like they could almost be eyeing that. Like, it's kind of like their last season. Like, they just punted on like the first couple games, and it's like, we'll figure this out and be back later. And to their credit, they kind of were. Like, in the middle of last year, right before Burrow got hurt, like, they destroyed the 49ers in San Francisco. Like, it looked like the Bengals, okay, here they come, they're back, and then he gets hurt. So I guess that is their way of thinking. It's weird, just because punting on games in the NFL just rarely works out, I would say. But that is something that they're. I don't think their season will be done if they lose this.
Well, folks, you heard his
horribly. Lose it horribly.
You heard Dirky Downer, and he was really trying to redeem himself when he predicted 41-10. Like 41-10, I believe is what he said. I'm going to go with a palindrome 31-13 for the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. But both of us selecting big wins for our football team against these Bengals. I guess we'll see y'all next week after Tony Romo and Jim Nantz have a field day with Mahomes and Joe Burrow on Sunday afternoon on CBS. This has been another episode of Amateur Hour. I'm Ryan Scott Hall. He's his Dirkness. We cheer for the Kansas City Chiefs. And let's go.
Threefs.
I love it.